Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to quickly discuss some things that you probably shouldn't do when you're here in Thailand. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over with is your body parts, what you're supposed to touch, not touch, and do with your hands and your feet. For one, it's considered disrespectful to touch any Thai person on their head. Their head is considered sacred. And that means on top of their head, anywhere on their head. Don't pat little kids on the top of the head, just don't touch their head. So keep that in mind. Also, now I know you may have this craving to touch a monk, but don't touch the monks. The monks are not to be touched by people, especially women. So keep your hands to yourself if you're around a monk. Some other things to remember about being around monks is that they are not allowed to sit by women. So let's say you're a woman and you go on a public transportation and there's a monk sitting there. You're not going to want to sit right beside him because everyone's going to look at you like you've lost your mind. So just keep that in mind when you see a monk on a bus or any sort of other seat. Just don't sit right beside him. Now, another thing that you're going to have to remember here is your left hand is considered nasty here. So if you shake someone's hand, you'd probably use your right anyway. Or if you hand something to somebody, anything like that, it's going to be done with your right hand. Now you'll see some Thais go as far as when they hand you something, you'll see them take their left hand and hold their right arm and hand you something. And that's to show you respect, basically that they're not going to hand you anything with their left hand. If you're wanting to know what is wrong with your left hand, it is considered unclean here in Thailand. Something I really had to get used to because, I use my left hand a lot and I have to keep reminding myself not to hand anything to anyone with my left hand. Another thing when we're still talking about hands is don't point at something. Go, hey, you, come here. I just did two things you're not supposed to do. So we'll get into the second one in a second. But one is pointing at people. If you need to point at somebody, use your whole hand like this, not like this. It's considered disrespectful, something that a lot of us are going to have to get used to here in Thailand. I know I still catch myself pointing at people. It's just one of those things that's been ingrained in me for a long time. So I'm still trying to kick the habit of that, but just try to use your hand like this. Another thing is when you're waving at somebody, notice I said like this. Waving like this is also considered disrespectful. So how are you supposed to wave somebody over if you want them to come over to you? See, I'm doing it just talking to you. And that is like this. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you can see on the side there, but you're going like this, and this actually means come here. And you may see a police officer saying come across the highway or something if he's directing traffic, and you'll see this, not this. So just keep that in mind here too. Now, so since we're still on the subject of appendages and what not to do with them, your feet. Your feet are considered the nastiest part of the body, which they probably are. And what you don't do is, let's say you're going up to a street vendor and they have all of their products laid across the ground. You're standing up, you walk up to the street vendor. Don't point at the merchandise with your feet. It may make sense to you, just point at it with your feet, no problem. It's lower to the ground than your hand. It is probably the number one thing not to do in Thailand. I would definitely say that's probably a top contender, if not number one. So don't use your feet to point at things. On that note, also don't point your feet at people. Now, if you mean, how are you going to point your feet at someone? Well, let's say you're crossing your legs and your foot is pointed right at the person next to you, or you're sitting at an angle and bottom of your foot is pointed towards somebody. It's disrespectful. You need to go ahead. If you're going to cross your leg, cross it all the way over. In the Western culture, almost like a woman normally does, where her foot is pointed downward. So if you're going to cross your legs, that would be a better way of doing it if you do not wish to offend anyone here in Thailand. Also, don't touch anything that is a sacred relic. And if you don't know what is a sacred relic, well, let's say you're at a temple somewhere Don't just reach up and grab all kinds of things that look like they have something to do with Buddhism. Don't touch it. Don't let your kids touch it. That's probably the number one, is kids running up, touching things that are sacred and the parents not doing anything about it. Highly offensive. This is something you're going to see quite often. And when you see tourists here doing that, you just kind of like, ugh, you know, but what are you going to do? So anyway, try to keep your hands off of sacred things. And that includes getting your selfie on things like climbing up ancient temples and trying to get a selfie done. More than likely, I'm going to say almost 99.9% of the time, you're not supposed to walk or climb up any of their sacred or ancient relics. So please don't do that, and that includes any sort of perimeter walls that are considered ancient, anything like that, all the ruins, just stay off of them. Now, when you go into certain homes, actually most homes and certain businesses, they expect you to take your shoes off. Not to take your shoes off is extremely rude. Now, how do you know when to take your shoes off, when not to take your shoes off? Well, if you see a bunch of shoes outside of the door already, that's a good sign. You need to take off your shoes. If you're going to a Thai family's home, you're gonna have to take off your shoes. I can just promise you that one. So always look to see if, before you go into the establishment, are there shoes left outside of the front door. Now, most places, businesses like the mall, I mean, you're gonna wear your shoes, and most other places, you'll know the ones, but just don't go into a place where it's obvious that you do need to take off your shoes and then ignore it and just wear your shoes in there. One thing you don't want to do, and you could possibly find yourself going to jail for this, and it's something you're probably not used to at all, and that is disrespecting the monarchy here, the king, the monarchy in general. You don't say anything derogatory about the royal family at all, because if you're caught saying it, typing it on Facebook while you're here, anything could get you in very hot water. And I mean, I'm talking as far as you will go to jail for it. So just keep any derogatory comments about the monarchy to yourself, if you have any, and you should do fine. Also about the monarchy, in public places, for instance, at the beginning of a football/soccer game here in Thailand, or at the beginning, if you're going to the movie theater, they're going to play an anthem, and you're going to see a photograph of the king. It is very much customary to stand whenever that is being played. So not standing would be the exact opposite. That would be considered offensive. So if you do hear this, please have some respect for the Thai culture and stand up. Another thing you don't want to catch yourself doing, and they will catch you if you do this, is you want to watch your dress attire if you're going to visit any of the Buddhist temples. Meaning women can't have their shoulders showing, and they need to wear long pants or have it covered with something so your legs aren't showing. A lot of times before you go into one of the big tourist type temples, you will see a vendor there that will basically rent you something to put over your shoulders or around your waist to cover up your legs, if that is the case. However, some of the smaller ones out in the middle of nowhere aren't going to have these vendors, so it's good to know ahead of time what to wear and what not to wear at some of these Buddhist temples. Another thing not to do, a lot of people like to come here and haggle with prices. Don't haggle too aggressively. Okay, don't get belligerent, get loud, and get all obnoxious over a price. That is not normal here. It is not necessary. If they're not coming down to your price, then give it up and go somewhere else. Maybe you're too cheap to buy that anyway. But anyway, just watch the severity of your haggling, because some people get really, really obnoxious and think that's the way it's done here. It's not. Another thing you may not want to do is show frustration and anger in public. The Thais do a good job, for the most part, of subduing those emotions. And I have seen a lot of foreigners and other tourists come here and totally lose it because of some simple miscommunication. Or maybe their food didn't get brought out at the same time as someone else's, and they just go off the deep end. These things are highly frowned upon, and it's not the norm here. So if you've got an anger issue and you come to Thailand, try to subdue that a little bit for your own benefit. So while we're on the topic of don't do, also don't drink the tap water. It can get you sick. I noticed that when we first got here, we've been in Thailand now for 2 years, that we noticed that none of the locals drank the tap water, at least none that we saw, and that they would buy their water. So we buy our water, we get our water, either we filter our water or we buy it in bottles. So don't drink the tap water. Now, I still brush my teeth with the tap water every day. I don't drink it, but I do brush my teeth with it. You don't have to go to the extreme. But I would say as a general rule, don't drink the tap water. If you are going to rent something, let's say a motor scooter, motorcycle, do not let them keep your passport as your collateral, let's say. You want to do money, even though it sounds like, oh, you will get your money back. There could be a bad vendor somewhere, but so far I've had great experiences with renting a motorcycle, giving them a 2,000 or 4,000 baht deposit. As long as you bring it back the same as you got it, they will give you that deposit back. Just don't give them your passport. The reason being is if you get stopped at a checkpoint somewhere, you are a tourist, they're going to want to, the first thing they're going to ask for is your passport because they want to make sure you're still legal to be here. So make sure you have your passport on you to avoid any sort of fine or problem you may have with the police. Last but not least on the list, do not come to Thailand without some sort of insurance. If you get injured here, there are groups on Facebook for expats, and there are articles all the time of foreigners coming here to visit, and they come here and they want to party and they're drunk and they get on their motor scooter that they rented. This is a place that has accidents all the time, one of the most dangerous places to drive in the world. So you really don't want to drink and drive here, get in an accident, and then have no insurance. Hey, accidents can happen if you're not drunk too. A lot of people do excursions, they go diving, they go mountain climbing, they go all these different things that they want to do here, outdoor events. You might get hurt. I mean, it's a good possibility that you're going to get hurt. Make sure you have some sort of adequate health coverage that will cover you for your stay here in Thailand, because guess what? If you get hurt and you go to a hospital and you cannot pay your bill, you're not going anywhere. And no, that doesn't mean you can go out and party and still have fun and overstay your visa. No, they're going to confine you and you're not going anywhere till you pay that bill, and you're going to end up on some expat chat group on Facebook for GoFundMe because I can't pay my medical bills and I'm stuck here in Thailand. So take my advice, find some sort of insurance that you can use to cover you on your stay here in Thailand. That's all the tips I have for you right now. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you feel so inclined, buy us a coffee. There's a link in the description. Or if you feel so inclined, if you look down below, you'll see something that says thanks, super thanks. Donate some money on there. We'd really appreciate it. Well, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm going to say thank you in Thai. Khap kun khap.